He knows this dream well. I better do a good job with it. Turn to Genesis 28 if you would. We'll pretty much stay right there for the most part till we get near the end of this, and then we'll turn to another text and study it just briefly. It's a great theme. I think I've said this a couple of times to you, maybe more than that, when I've been here in the past. I love your themes that you've done. Melanie and I were talking about them on the way over. I can't remember all of them, but I know you've done Mills of the Bible, the Mountains of the Bible, and the Rivers of the Bible. And I think I said something like that last year. I think it's really cool. I think I said what I'm about to say to you. I wish I'd come up with it because I keep wanting to. Every year when I'm coming up with their theme at Hoover, I'm like, I'd like to do, the dreams of the Bible and the rivers of the Bible, but everybody would think I just stole it from Drew, which they would be right. And if our churches were farther apart from each other, then I could get away with it, but I don't think it would happen. Genesis 28. So I'm like Drew. This is a beautiful story. It's an awesome dream, and it's one of those texts in the Bible that I've found, especially as I was preparing it for tonight. I was just thinking about how you go into a study and you think that's a really neat story. Jacob's ladder. There's songs written about this particular dream. It's kind of one of those stories that's pretty well known in the Old Testament. This dream about this ladder. But also, I find myself a lot of times when I approach a text, I think, man, I don't know if this is going to be that interesting. There's got some interesting stuff that you can learn about it, but not everybody's interested in learning some of the minutia of it. And so if it's not going to be that interesting, I struggle with that sometimes, especially early in my preparation. But it's almost always the case that as you study the Bible, and I think this is true because it's the Bible and it's the mind of God, that as you get into a text and you start wrestling with it and praying about it and thinking through it, that you find that there are just some gems in text, some things that we apply and think about. This really could make a difference in people's lives. And this is one of those stories that's like that. You can read it superficially. You can read through the story. But as you dive into some of the things that are going on, it's fascinating that God uses this story in a beautiful way. And I hope to be able to maybe just shed a little bit of light on that as we go through the story and think about how this points ahead to something even more beautiful than what we read in Genesis 28. Let me just set the stage for you just a little bit so you know where we are in the biblical story. Genesis 28 is at a very, very difficult time in Jacob's life. Things are going badly for him. I want to make sure that we read this with the right kind of glasses, okay? Because I think sometimes we read about, Abraham or Isaac or Jacob, and maybe there might be a temptation to spiritualize everything and make them seem maybe more spiritual than they actually were. So I want to make sure that you guys remember what Jacob is like, especially at this point in his life, all right? You go back to Jacob's life, and from the very beginning of his life, he is not really a good person. Even, this isn't about his character, but even at his birth, he got this name of supplanter. He's one who grabs the heel. He's one who is characterized by deception. You see that in his life, the story about Jacob and Esau coming in, and he's tired from being outside, and Jacob sells him Jacob buys his birthright for a mess of pottage. Remember that story? Jacob was a deceiver. You go on in that story in the life of Jacob, and you may remember that got to the end of their dad's Isaac's life, and Jacob and his mother concocted this whole deal where they'd go in there and they would deceive Isaac and make Isaac think that Jacob was Esau and put goat skin on his arms and cook up this meat and these goats and make it taste like venison, this whole thing. And so he blessed Jacob thinking it was Esau. Esau finds out about it and is furious, as you might expect. And this Jacob he's not a really good guy. Like, he's not a hero. He's not somebody that you look at and you think, I want to be like Jacob. Jacob he's a rough kind of guy. He's manipulative. He's trying to manipulate other people and situations in order to make things better for him. Now, he doesn't have any kids, and Jacob is in a desperate situation. So when you pick up the story, you kind of pick it up midstream, you need to recognize that Jacob is in a bad spot here. He's on the run. He has nothing. As far as he's concerned, he has no future. He thought he got the birthright. He thought he got the blessing from his father, but it's turning out to be not so good, is things aren't really good at all. And then he comes to this place. So I'm going to go ahead and read this, starting in verse 10. With that background, this is where Jacob is. This is where he is mentally and spiritually. He's not a very spiritual man, at least at this point in his life. Things aren't going well. Verse 10 says he left Beersheba and he went toward Haran. So he's going north. Haran is way up to the north and to the east. He came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth. And this morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. Genesis 28:10 through 22. So what we have here is so north of Beersheba, okay? But Haran is way up, from your perspective, it's way up here to the north and off to the east slightly, okay? About 400 miles or so up there. So that takes him out of the land. He's going to go up to his kinfolks, but that's out of the land. And this land thing was a big deal to them, you know? God had said back to Abraham in Genesis 12, he had said essentially three things. You know, I'm going to make of you a great nation. That's going to be Israel. I'm going to give you this land. And he gave him the boundaries of the land. And then you're going to be a blessing to others. Ultimately, you're going to be a blessing to the whole world. And so that promise was a very important promise to Abraham. And God confirmed it to Isaac. And so Jacob was aware of it. You know, he knew this. And so he's leaving everything he's familiar with. He's at Beersheba. Maybe he traveled up to Bethel and he got to this place and went to bed. But he knows where he's going is going to take him out of that land. So notice this. Verse 11. And some translations don't bring this out, but the ESV and probably most of the ones you're reading from will. But notice the repetition of the word place here is pretty important for this story. Verse 11, he came to a certain place. Later on in that verse, taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. Look down to verse 16. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Verse 17, he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? Skip down to verse 19. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. It's just interesting. This isn't by coincidence. He didn't just accidentally do this. There's this emphasis on the place, on the location, on this physical place where God is going to manifest himself to Jacob in this theophany, you know. There's this emphasis on place. Notice also the repetition of land or earth. Look at verse 12. He dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. Look in verse 13, the latter part of it, God making this promise. He says, the land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring. Verse 14, your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And then he gives these directions. You're going to spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. There's this emphasis, down in, verse 19, he mentions place again. But there's this emphasis here on place 6 times. He says land multiple times. He says this emphasis on earth. There's just this stress. He wants us to notice that he is emphasizing this part of God's promise here. Now we'll come back to that when we get near the end of this lesson, but I wanted you to notice that emphasis here. Also, one more thing, just verbal kind of things here that you might want to pay attention to. And again, not all translations are going to bring this out, but it's the word behold. When you see the word behold, and this is true in the Old Testament and the New Testament, though it's different underlying words, translated with the word behold, it carries the same kind of punch to it. And the author puts this in the text for a reason. He puts this word behold there because he wants you to pause and he wants you to hear what he's about to say. It's almost like he comes to a point, we do this in our own speaking, he comes to this point, he pauses and he says, listen to what I'm about to tell you. Listen to this, behold. That's the way they would do it. So you'll notice this when you read this text. Verse 12, for example, the ladder. Saw the ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reached to heaven, and behold. Well, I want to pay close attention to what follows the behold there. It all matters, but some of it, he's drawing our attention to it. So behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. So I want to listen to that. We'll come back there in just a second. Verse 13, and behold, the Lord stood above it, or could be beside him. You may have a footnote there that says something like that. So the Lord stood there in some sense in the dream. Behold. So I want to pay attention to that particularly. And then you get down to verse 15, and this is where God makes these three promises to Jacob. We'll come back and look at this, but just for now, notice the verbal marker here. Verse 15, behold, I am with you. I'll keep you wherever you go. I'll bring you back to this land. Those three things that God promises there. So those three places there in the text, the author puts this little word there, and he says, I want you to listen closely to what I'm about to tell you. And the words, of course, precede the angels going up and down on the ladder, God standing in some respect to the ladder, and then the promises that God makes to Jacob down in verse 15. So as we go through it, just be aware that there are these clues here. There's an emphasis on land, earth, and place. There's emphasis on these three things that are happening in the vision with the word behold. And it's important for us to listen up, particularly to what he's trying to teach us. Now, a couple of things here as you read this story, just to explain maybe a thing or two here. You notice this stone has some importance. He takes it at the very beginning and he uses it as a pillow, or it could be that doesn't sound very comfortable for me to sleep on a rock, a stone. So the language here is pretty flexible, and it doesn't actually mean that he used it as a pillow. It could mean that he put it on the ground and it in some sense kind of circumscribed him, like he was sleeping and he put his head between stones. It doesn't really matter ultimately. The point of it is, in some sense, he took this stone and he used it in the place where he slept. Then he's going to take that same stone at the end of the story. So it frames the story. Got a stone at the first part, you got the stone at the end. He uses that same stone and he puts it up and he pours oil on it, some sort of an offering or a libation. That was something that they did to consecrate certain things. So you got that at the beginning and you got that at the end. So that's another thing that we need to pay attention to. So he went down to sleep. Now, I want you to notice here, Jacob, I mentioned this earlier, Jacob is very vulnerable here. Now, you think about Jacob, how he's been very, very manipulative up until this point. I mean, he's done what he could to get what he wanted. Jacob's all about Jacob. You're going to see some hints of that in our story here as well. Jacob wants to do what's best for Jacob. But you get to this point in his life, and he's extremely vulnerable. And I think God has led him to this point. He's done this manipulating. He thought, I got the birthright from my brother Esau. I got my father to bless me instead of Esau. I am sitting pretty, so to speak, right? But now he's on the run. He's not married, has no kids. From his perspective, it seems like everything is falling apart. He stops at this particular place. There's a reason why I think God acts at this particular time. He's on the run. He's a fugitive. He has nothing. He has no future as far as he's concerned. He lies down and he goes to sleep. There is no time, I think, when we are more vulnerable than when we are helplessly lying with no protection and we are asleep. I believe there's a reason why God chose this particular moment when Jacob is as low as he can get. He lies down and he goes to sleep, and God takes advantage of that opportunity to teach him something that he needed to hear. So you've got that vulnerability aspect here. So he goes to sleep and he has this dream. There's this ladder set up on the earth. Now, the ladder, I don't know what you visualize or what comes to your mind when you think of a ladder. Could be that, when I think of a ladder, I think of when you prop up against the house, you got the rungs going up. Probably wasn't like that. One scholar translates it like a ramp. Could be just like a ramp that goes at an angle like that. That word can mean that. It can mean like a stairway. And so it could be, you've got these images perhaps in your mind of like the Tower of Babel back in Genesis 10, this ziggurat, these Babylonian kind of structures that are these stair steps. Could be something like that. And so in my mind, at least based on what I've studied, I visualize not a ladder that goes straight up, but rather some sort of angled incline, in my mind at least, I've got stair steps going up, and that certainly fits what this word means. It probably wasn't a ladder in the sense that you and I normally think of that. So he sees this stairway, this staircase set up on the earth. There's an emphasis on the earth again. The top of it reached to heaven. And the angels of God, behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. What in the world is going on? What does this mean? I mean, I think for Jacob what this meant, we're going to see how maybe God uses this in a bigger sense in a minute. But I think for Jacob, what he recognized when he saw this in his dream was that God wanted him to understand that though at this moment, Jacob, you are incredibly vulnerable. You got nothing to protect you. You don't have any family. You're lying there sleeping. And in that moment, what Jacob needed to know more than anything else was that God in heaven was very concerned about what was going on with Jacob. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. You think about Jacob at this moment and what he must have been feeling and what God communicated to them in that scene in the dream. The staircase, and the angels are going up and down. And in Jacob's world, what angels represented was what God was doing. They were messengers. They were also these creatures, these created beings who carried out God's purposes. So those two ideas, they communicated to God what was going on earth. There's that idea that the message is going from earth to heaven. And then God is sending angels down to accomplish His will. So I think the overall point of this for Jacob would have been, I may feel like I'm all alone and that I have no future and things are not going to work out for me. But God communicates to him in that moment by telling him that heaven is very interested in what's going on earth. Particularly, God is intimately concerned about you, Jacob. Now, it's important to understand, Jacob had done absolutely nothing to earn this kind of favor. Nothing. Jacob had been a manipulator and a deceiver, and yet in that moment, in spite of Jacob's own rebellion and sinfulness, God comes to him in this dream and essentially says to him, Jacob, you may think that you need to manipulate everything in order for it to work out, but what I want you to learn is heaven is in control. God is, I am doing what needs to be done, and I am the one ultimately who will bring you success or failure. It's not about how much you can manipulate the people around you, how well you can lie. The angels ascending and descending on this ladder, this staircase, would have made and did make a pretty lasting impression. In fact, Jacob is going to come back to this place in Genesis 35. He's going to come back to this place. He's going to keep his word in what he says down below. But that's the dream that he saw. The angels, that's our first behold there. Then the second behold is in verse 13. Behold, the Lord stood above it. It's a translation question there. It could mean that the Lord stood beside him. So it's not clear. It could be that the Lord in the dream is standing beside the staircase in heaven. Some feel pretty strongly that the language ought to suggest that Yahweh, as it's this is the word for the Lord here, the covenant name of God, that He's actually standing in the dream beside Jacob. Either way you read this, there's an emphasis here that God is the one who is in control, that God is standing there, and He is the one for whom the angels are going up and they're coming down. They are the messengers of God accomplishing His will. So then He makes this promise in verse 13. This sounds familiar to us because it's, in many respects, almost identical to the one He had said given to Abraham back in Genesis 12 and had confirmed to Jacob's father Isaac earlier on. I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. You're going to spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south, and you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Very important covenant promise. You know that from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob. And ultimately, this is fulfilled as God works through this family to bring about Jesus Christ into the world. But I want you to focus on the third behold there, and it's in verse 15. Notice three things that God says to him. He says, behold, I am with you. I will keep you, and I will bring you back to this land. He promises Jacob three things. These three things coincide with our deepest needs. He promises Jacob, I am with you. He promises him presence. One of our greatest needs as human beings is we need to feel like we're not alone. He says, I will keep you wherever you go. One of our greatest needs is to know that we are secure, that we're safe. And God says, I'm going to protect you. He says, thirdly, I will bring you back to this land. We need to feel as if we have a place to belong. We need to feel like we've got a home. So what God says basically to Jacob, after he repeats the covenant promises, he says, Jacob, I am going to be with you. You're never going to be alone. I am going to take care of you. I'm going to protect you wherever you go. Whether you go out of the land, that's where he's heading. He's heading up to Haran, to Padan Aram, which is outside of the land. Look, I'm not the God of this land. I'm the God of all. So I'll be with you wherever you go. You've got my presence, and I'll be protecting you no matter where you go. You've got security. And then I'm going to bring you back to this land. You've got a home. And though you're going to leave, I'm going to be watching over you to bring you back to this land. Not going to leave you until I've done what I've promised you. Jacob woke up, verse 16, and he said, the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. How awesome is this place? This is the house of God. He set up the pillar. He poured oil on top of it, and he called the name of the place Bethel. The word Bethel, you probably got a footnote in your Bible that says this. The word Bethel means the house of God. And he called it that because it basically means the dwelling place of God. This was a place where God had revealed himself to Jacob, and Jacob gives it an appropriate name. Now notice the last part of this text, verses 20 through end of the chapter, verse 20 through 22. Jacob made a vow, and he said, notice how this coincides. It parallels, with one exception, what God had just promised him. He says, if God will be with me, God had said, I'll be with you, right? Or I'm with you. There's presence there. And he will keep me in this way that I go. That's the protection idea. And then in verse 21, he says, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. That was the third promise that God made to him, that he would bring him back home, right? Give him this home, he'll bring him back. Now, in the middle of this, at the end of verse 20, he says, you'll give me bread and to eat and clothing to wear. Now, I think what's going on here, this is important for us to read this in the right way, I think. I believe what we learn here is that Jacob is still a manipulator. I think Jacob is going to learn and he's going to grow, but I think at this particular moment he's had he's witnessed this theophany and God has made him promises. But for Jacob, there's still an if here. There's still that if of verse 20. He says, if God will be with me, if he keeps me in the way that I go, if he gives me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and if he brings me back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. Do you see that kind of if then? This is what Jacob had been doing his whole life. This is what he's going to do when he goes to Laban's house in the next chapter. And the whole thing with Leah and Rachel and that whole story. Jacob is a manipulator. And here, even in this time, I think it's Brueggemann, this particular writer, who says, Jacob is still a bargain hunter. That's what he called him. He's still a bargain hunter. Okay, God made me these promises. You made me these promises. And if you keep them, then I'll let you be my God. That's why I said earlier, I don't want us to spiritualize Jacob here and make him into some spiritual giant that he's not. Even after he had witnessed this, he's still saying to God, I'll do that if you hold up your end of the bargain. You see that? This is a big deal. Because God is working with a very flawed man here. God's always worked with flawed people, right? He still does. Now, he says, you'll be my God, verse 22. This will be your house. Of all that you give me, I'll give a full tenth to you. Now, I want to go to the book of John for a couple minutes. So I want you to notice here how Jesus uses this story early in his ministry to make an important point. We don't have a lot of time to look at this story here, but I just really want to tease out just a couple things from it. This is a story, if you remember, the paragraph would be John 1:43 through 51, through the end of the chapter. It's Jesus' encounter with a man named Nathanael. Back up in verse 45 of John 1, Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, I'm in verse 47 of John 1, and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" Jesus answered him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." A couple things here that I am convinced we're supposed to see when we read John 1 with Genesis 28 in mind, you know. You got in Genesis 28 a man who is a deceiver and a manipulator, a bargain hunter. And when you read this, which obviously you see there in verse 51 that Jesus is referring, he's referring to Jacob's ladder, you know. He's referring to that because he says, you're going to see the angel, you're going to see heaven opened, you're going to see the angels of God ascending and descending on what? On the Son of Man, right? So he's telling this, he's saying this so that his hearers, and they would know that they ought to hear that against the backdrop of Jacob's ladder, right? So you got a couple of things here that are very important. One of them is, I think we're supposed to see that Jacob in Genesis 28 is a bargain hunter. He's a deceiver. But in our story in John 1, Jesus intentionally compares Nathanael to Jacob. Because what did he say about Nathanael? He said, "Behold, an Israelite." Indeed, Jacob's name was changed to Israel. The nation of Israel came from Jacob, as you know. "Behold, an Israelite, indeed, in whom there is no" what? No guile or no deceit, no dishonesty. Jacob's whole pattern of living was characterized by deceit and dishonesty and guile. And yet here, Jesus wants us to see this trajectory from Jacob to Nathanael, from being a person of guile and deceit and a person who manipulates in order to work things out the way he wants, to somebody like Nathanael who's almost childlike faith. Jesus says, "I saw you earlier under the fig tree." Nathanael says, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Contrast that with Jacob's response. Jacob had just seen this theophany. He had just witnessed in his dream God speaking to him, the ladder, angels going up and down. Jacob witnessed that, and what was his response? Yeah, he was overwhelmed, it seems. He put up a stone, he poured oil on it. He said, "This is an important place, so let's make a deal. Let's make a deal." Nathanael, at just a small instigation here, he hadn't seen much. Jesus acknowledges it. You haven't seen anything yet. You say that based on that? Nathanael saw hardly anything, and he said, "You are the Son of God. You're the King of Israel." Contrast that with a man of deceit in Genesis 28. And then Jesus caps it off by saying, "You haven't seen anything yet, Nathanael. Truly, truly," which is John's way. Jesus said this, but John emphasizes this throughout the Gospel of John. This verily, verily, or truly, truly, or amen, amen. That's his way of telling us. That's the behold of Genesis 28 for John. Behold, listen up. You will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. There's this really cool thing in the Bible, the way that these themes pop up again and again, and one of them is the dwelling place of God, where God dwells. You see it all over the Old Testament. There, Jacob refers to that, the house of God, when he says, I'm going to call this place Bethel. I'm going to call it the house of God because God lives here. But that theme is all over the Bible. God lives here. God dwells here. In John, when we read John 1, we read, I just read a few verses from the end of it, but we ought, at least in our minds, to go back to the first part of the book, of the chapter, because there, John had said, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, the same was in the beginning with God. Then in verse 14, he says, you remember this, and the Word became, or the Word was made flesh. Most translations are going to say something like, and dwelled among us, right? We beheld His glory, the glory of, as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. But it's important for you to understand that verb there that's translated dwell means, or it can be translated tabernacled, which they would have heard that and understood that in the Old Testament, God dwelled among His people in the tabernacle, right? They built the tabernacle, God descended in the smoke and the fire and all that. He descended and He symbolically dwelled in the tabernacle. This is where God dwelled, But now we know that the house of God is it's not Bethel, it's not the tabernacle, it's not the temple. Jesus said, you destroy this house. Destroy the temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. Remember that? They were confused by that. What was He talking about? I'm talking about the temple. Talking about His body, because His body, Jesus Christ, is the house of God. He is the dwelling place of God. In fact, in Matthew 1:23, when they're talking about Jesus' upcoming birth, you shall call His name Emmanuel, which means God with us. That's the house of God. That's the dwelling place of God. So when we study this dream that Jacob had, we read it and we understand what it meant for Jacob at that time. But Jesus Himself here knew about that dream quite well. And He said that dream actually, when it's filled full, it's talking about something bigger than a ladder. That you see, heaven comes to earth, not in a staircase, but heaven and earth unite in Jesus when you have God taking on human flesh. The incarnation, this is heaven, God, not coming to us on a staircase, but God coming to us in a baby, born in the manger, or placed in the manger. That whole emphasis there on Jesus dwelling among us in the flesh, that is the fulfillment of Jacob's dream. That we, on this side of the cross, we get to know things Jacob didn't know. I mean, you got Jesus saying a lot of the same things that God said to Jacob, God said, I am with you. And Jesus is our Emmanuel. He's God with us. God said, I will keep you. And we know that Jesus Himself, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. Behold, I'll be with you to the end of the age, He would say to the disciples not too long after this. So let me just wrap this up for you and me. What do we take away from this? See, I think one of the main things we ought to take away from it is we need to get rid of the ifs. That we don't need to be if kind of Christians. We don't need to be like Jacob in this respect. That the trajectory from Genesis 28 to John 1 it's heading toward a Nathaniel kind of faith where we come to Him with a childlike faith. Didn't Jesus teach this? You become like children. You become like a child. You become like this Nathaniel kind of spirit, not a Jacob kind of thing. Well, God, you know what? I'm going to step back and I'm going to see if you hold up your end of the deal. but rather we see the God-man, Jesus Christ. And we know how God has revealed himself to us through Christ. And our perspective becomes like Nathanael's. And it is, you are the Son of God. You're the King of Israel. That our faith is that kind of childlike faith. It's not a, God, if you'll do this, and if you work things out, if my life goes like this, and if you heal me of this, and my kids turn out like that, and my marriage is like this, and my relationships and my job, and you bless me in all these ways, like a prosperity gospel kind of thing. If you do this, or if I do this for you, will you do this for me? Or if you do that, then I will do this. Instead, we read in John 1 as Jesus interprets for us what he was teaching us in the dream that he gave to Jacob, is that our attitude ought to be one where we simply fall down at the feet of Jesus and we say, I give you everything. Not if. It's not a contingent sort of thing. No matter what happens, I'm going to serve you. I will serve you. That's what Nathanael was saying essentially. And when we understand who Jesus truly was, Jacob didn't, in all fairness, Jacob didn't have what we've got, you know. Jacob didn't have it. But when we understand who Jesus is, that he is the incarnation of the God of heaven, then our response needs to be like Nathanael. You are my God. You are my King. And I will serve you with everything that I have and everything that I've got. If you're not a Christian tonight, it's an awesome thing to be a Christian. You know, God doesn't promise us everything's going to be smooth. So I hope that we don't ever come across as trying to teach people that once you become a Christian, God's going to take all your problems away. God doesn't promise that. What he promises is he'll be with us, and he will protect us, and he will give us a home. Same promises he made to Jacob, he makes to us. He'll always be with us. He'll never forsake you. He'll walk with you no matter what happens. And he'll wrap his arms around you, and he will shield you, and he will take care of you. But ultimately, our response to him is, Lord, no matter what, I just want to serve you, and I want you to be my Lord and Savior. If you're ready to make that kind of commitment tonight, you can come forward in just a moment. Confess Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, saying to him basically what Nathanael said. You're the God of Israel. You're the King of Israel. You're the Son of God, and I want you to be my Lord. And as you confess that, turning away from your sins, we'll baptize you into Christ for the forgiveness of all of your sins. What an awesome thing it is to have your sins washed away by Jesus Christ. You can do that tonight. Maybe you need to come and you need to ask for prayers because your life has not been characterized by a Nathanael-like faith, you know. Maybe lately we've strayed some and you need the prayers of your church family here. They'll gladly do that. If you need to respond, I hope you'll come. Let's stand and sing this song.